The Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. When housing costs rise, homelessness often follows. As rents climb, more people are priced out, relying on government and nonprofit programs just to stay housed or to find a new place to live. That's happening here in Detroit, where housing affordability is now a top concern. Surveys show 6 in 10 residents here are cost burdened by rent. And it's not just Detroit. In Lansing, city leaders are also confronting a rise in homelessness. Last month, officials there approved the purchase of 50 temporary housing pods, small shelters meant to provide immediate relief. But how much can these pods really help? And what bigger steps are needed to address the problem? To discuss this now, we have Andy Schor here. He's the mayor of Lansing. Mayor Schor, welcome to the Metro. Mayor Schor,
sorry about that. I had you on mute. Sorry about that.
No,
thank you. Appreciate
no
you
worries.
having me.
It's the beauty of live radio. So let's start here. Can you paint a picture for us? First and foremost, what do these pods actually look like? And what kind of space do they provide for someone experiencing homelessness?
Sure. Yeah, they're fairly small. They provide a bed on one side and then a kind of a cabinet little area for storage of things. We've got 50 of them. 16 of them actually have 2 beds. So 16 of them are a little bigger. So we'll be able to house 66 people at one time. They're transitional. So we're going to have folks who are in these pods. We're going to have separate facilities, which will have bathrooms and showers. We will have a resource area where people can come and work on, finding a job, being stabilized, getting any documentation they need to get their IDs or whatever they would need for a job, to get housing vouchers.
Mayor,
so we'll have resource
Mayor
areas.
Schor, we're going to get into all of that. I do want to first just I wanted to visualize this housing pod. So it's basically a pod that you can sleep in, that gives you shelter from the elements, that provides safety. And does it have, like, let's say a door that locks? I mean, I just want to try and visualize these a little more if we could.
Yeah, they do have doors. They're like a very small one-room shelter house, I guess, but they do have doors. They have their privacy, and yeah, it's not huge. It's a bed and then some storage area. Again, there's no bathroom, there's no sink or anything, so it's a pod.
Sure.
And if you go online and you Google it, you can see what it looks like. It's hard to explain, but they actually look pretty nice. They're called Mod Pods. So anyone who's listening, go online, Google Mod Pods. Several communities are using them pretty effectively.
Okay, let's talk about the Mod Pod and who came up with the idea of using these units in Lansing, if we could.
We did a pretty comprehensive housing study, homelessness study, on how do we prevent homelessness, how do we help folks, how do we help those that are unsheltered or that are in shelter to get to housing. So this was part of that study. We looked at how we can get these. We did an RFP, and it came back pretty expensive. Came back at like $1 million, which we didn't have available. And then we found out that another community, City of Kalamazoo, had purchased some of these and then went in a different direction with resources for homeless. They put them up for bid. So we bid, and we were able to get them at about half price. So once we did that, we went to council, and we got approved. It's called a carry forward, dollars that we had put aside last year into the current budget. The council approved it unanimously. Again, this is not the full solution. You asked when you opened, is this the solution? This is part of the solution. This is a transitional housing part of the solution. But it's, every little bit helps when you're getting people out of encampments or out of their cars and into pods to be stabilized and then into housing.
Yeah. It has to be a multifaceted solution addressing homelessness. And certainly
That's right.
this seems like it can be part of that solution. A few more questions I have for you about the logistics. Do you know
Sure.
when the pods could be in use and where they may go?
Yeah, we're working on that now. We're working on location. We you have to look at the total cost. Again, we've got the 50 pods, which can house 66 people. We have to get the resource centers. We would certainly love to have some kind of a concrete pad somewhere that has a building next to it where we can either a building with showers or somewhere that has plumbing that we can just install showers. That keeps the cost down because the resource is there and we have the facility. If we just did it on an open piece of land, then we'd have to build the resource center and we'd have to put in plumbing and all that, and that can get pretty expensive. So we're looking for the right location. We've got a committee working on that, and they're going to make they looked at something like 35 different places. They're going to make recommendations of three or four, and then our folks are going to go into those neighborhoods and talk to the folks to say, this is what it looks like. What are your thoughts? We have some neighborhoods that are very supportive, and some neighborhoods that don't want a facility like this in their neighborhoods. So we have to have buy-in from the neighbors. So the logistics are that we're going to work all that out. There has to be rezoning because it's technically what's called a campground.
Hmm.
So we'll need to send it to our planning board and to our city council. So our city council has to have buy-in. And then the issues come with the state because you need about 6 to 9 months to get state licensure. Once we have the location, we will apply for licensure from the state. We certainly would love to see that expedited. But we are looking at March or April at the earliest because of the approvals through zoning here and then state approvals. Putting them together will be easy. That won't be hard because we have all the pieces that we need. It's just getting the approvals.
Mayor, it sounds like one of the biggest barriers then is going to be going back to the first thing you mentioned, which is location. And I'm wondering what you've been hearing from residents. I mean, it could be a new level of NIMBYism, not in my backyard, because although this sounds like a transitional solution that could really be impactful, we know that there are a lot of people who will say homelessness is a horrible, horrible thing until they're confronted with it in their backyards. What are you hearing from residents? And talk a little bit more about what you anticipate when it comes to challenges.
We heard everything. We heard folks come in and say these are really important. We have homelessness advocates, our state representative. We have a lot of folks who came out and said these are really important. They're all working to make sure that we can find that right location. But, like you said, it depends on where. There are a lot of folks who don't want to see, something like this put into a park because they believe that, the park is where their kids go to play and they don't want a homeless encampment in their park. So there are people that have pushed back on some of the locations, but we have not heard that throughout the city yet. We haven't really gone into the neighborhoods to say, hey, here's what it looks like. Here's what you've got. It's secure. It's its own little community. There's fencing and things that actually the fence looks really nice. Again, I hope your listeners will go online and look. The fence looks really nice. So it just looks like a small little community, a small little neighborhood. So we want to show that. But first, we want to find the right location. You have to find the right location that is not going to blow up the cost, that's going to be sustainable. And then we want to go into those communities and show, those neighbors what it looks like and say, we all want to help our fellow person. We all want to make sure that they're not living on the streets and, sleeping in tents with needles and no sanitation, things like that. It's just not humane. So we want to make sure that they have these opportunities. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. So we just have to show folks what this looks like, what makes sense, and hear from them. So we'll go through that. Lansing's a very welcoming community, and I think that, while there's NIMBYism everywhere, I think that folks will take a look, and once we figure out those locations, we'll have those conversations with those neighbors.
One concern that people raise sometimes about this is the concentration of poverty. And by that, I mean, if these housing pods are placed, let's say, in neighborhoods with concentrated poverty, it could add pressure to an area that's already under-resourced. Do you worry that placing pods in such communities could compound the challenges people there are facing?
It's part of the conversation. It is definitely part of the conversation. If someone comes out and says, "Wait a minute, we've got significant challenges in an area, or we're rebuilding an area, and they don't want them," it's part of the conversation. Again, I think first we have to find the locations that will work the best feasibly, and then have that conversation and let folks weigh in on that. So these themselves are not concentrating poverty, because again, they're transitional. We're going to have folks that go in, they're there for maybe 2-3 months at a time, they get stabilized, and then they get into housing. So these pods are not, you're not just putting people into a pod community and leaving it there forever.
Right.
You're putting people in who are getting stabilized and then moving into housing. And if we can move 50 people at a time every few months, that's a good thing.
Sure. Forgive me for jumping in, but I think a crucial point about these pods is their ability to potentially connect people to social services, which you mentioned before. And so getting folks that line to resources is an important step. We talk about housing and homelessness a lot on our show, Mayor Schor. Producer Sam Corey recently spoke to a Housing First nonprofit leader in Oakland County about why homelessness is increasing.
Many are working multiple jobs because they can't get full-time work at one job, because they might not be able to get benefits for a full-time job, or their schedules are very erratic. They might not have a set schedule. And so one schedule will say like, "Oh, you need to work on Monday now at 2:00, but their other job is at Monday at 2:00, so then they lose one of their jobs. I mean, there is so much that these families are logistically putting together just to survive.
So from this perspective, the cause cited for homelessness going up is because housing costs are outpacing wages. And it's really difficult for people to hold down 2 low-wage jobs because their schedules change all the time. Then there are folks who are specifically citing addiction or mental health issues as factors for why homelessness is going up. What do you believe is at the root of our rising rates of homelessness?
I believe it's both of them. And the first one is something we can address. Right. The first one is something where we can stabilize, we can get folks again into appropriate jobs. Here in Lansing, we have what's called the Capital Area Michigan Works, where they help people get jobs and they help people with resumes. The first one is something we can address. The second one is really a tougher problem, especially when you have folks like when you have shelters where people, they can't bring drugs into shelters. Sometimes they go into a shelter and they're on drugs and they're not thrown out, but you can't bring drugs into shelters. You can't be violent in a shelter. You can't, if you have a mental health or substance abuse issue, then you are on the street because you cannot get stabilized. And that's a bigger problem. We see that. We see that a lot. In Lansing, we're excited because University of Michigan is bringing in about 80 or 90 behavioral health beds, which we think will help to stabilize those with mental health issues. But our community mental health here is overwhelmed. And that is a bigger problem. When you have 40, 50 people at an encampment, you go in there and say, we can get you housing. And they say, either they've got drug problems or they have mental health issues. And again, they're violent. You can't put a violent person in a shelter with other people. They get thrown out and then they get on a list. So those are the ones that are more challenging because the behavioral health and mental health resources just cannot keep up with the need. And that goes back years and years to the big mental health hospitals closing down and no replacements
under Governor John
created.
Engler. Yes,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, again, CMH, it was decentralized, and CMH they are overwhelmed. So that to me is the biggest problem. The pods will help to address the first part. The second part continues to be a problem everywhere, in Lansing and everywhere. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors had a whole task force on it, on mental health. And the legislature talks about it all the time.
Right. In other words, this is an issue cities cannot solve on their own. Lansing Mayor Andy Schor, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, an advocate working to prevent domestic violence shares what people can do to help. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. We'll be right back after the news from NPR and WDET. Stay with us.